I'd like to talk a little bit about how often we feel, if you will, promptings or messages from beyond, from those that have passed on. And we hear many people talk about it. We have people who are atheists and don't believe in that. At the same time, even they know people who will testify that they have been communicated to or prompted or directed to a certain thing or avenue from an ancestor or friend who has passed on. And is that really so hard to believe? I won't fill this with a lot of doctrine, but my doctrine is that, the soul lives on. It is eternal. It was designed to be eternal. I live here in southwest Iowa. Much of the landscape here in southwest Iowa, as well as southeast Nebraska, owes the locations of many of its cities and communities to the Mormon exodus west towards Salt Lake City. There are a number of people who elected during the winter of 1846 who have elected not to go forth to the Salt Lake Valley. There were those who were directed to stay in the area, to populate, for very divine purposes. But there was one group of people led by a man named Alpheus Cutler who, for one reason or the other, they felt the need to stay in the area and break away from the main pioneer exodus west. So they broke from the main church. And they came down further into southwest Iowa from the Council Bluffs area. And it is in a place that they built a community, a thriving community, which they called Manti. Now, Manti is an odd word for those outside of the LDS faith, but it is a name provided from the Book of Mormon, a sacred ancient scripture that the Latter-day Saints deem as scripture. It is the canon. And so Manti, it was a thriving community, and for about 20 years it was a crossroads for stagecoaches. Various businesses were built up, and within that time frame, roughly 3 to at least 500 inhabitants claimed residence in Manti. Now, due to the railroad came through this area and platted it out, and they located the tracks a couple miles to the north of where Manti is. So obviously, in the 1800s, people go where the goods are. And so it didn't take long for Manti to dry up. And the people either moved away or they moved to what is now called Shenandoah, which is by where the tracks are. And so it is there where hotels and stagecoaches, liveries, all those things were set up and built up into the thriving community that is now. Now, Manti today it has trees. It is actually a park, but it's got trees. It's got a nature trail, but it does have a cemetery of the inhabitants of Manti, and it is unknown the exact number of people who are buried on this cemetery, but there is a number of them that are buried. Obviously, originally with any cemetery, you're going to have headstones. Now, this cemetery is located about a quarter of a mile to the south of Manti Park, and so it's basically like out in the middle of a cornfield, and so it is very susceptible to vandalism and the elements. And so over time, a lot of these headstones were broken, moved, and stolen. And so it was deemed necessary several years ago to just remove those headstones and to place them in the historical museum for safekeeping. And so, in my opinion, that was a smart move for historical reasons. You want to preserve that, and there's no telling how many of those headstones, if any, would still be remaining had they not been taken from the cemetery. Now, going back to the initial comment that I brought up about how people feel like they're being called to or summoned to from those who have passed on. For several years now, I have felt quite a longing, if you will, a compelling thought on Manti and what to do with it. It is not a well-visited park, not a well-known park. And so it is for properties like this, it becomes a budgetary constraint. And so, the idea is, okay, who should take care of Manti Park and other parks like it around the world, around the country? Anytime you have a plot of land that contains a cemetery where people have been laid to rest, and you just contemplate for a second the lives that those people have lived. Many of them didn't live long. They were babies, they were youngsters, teenagers, middle-aged and old. The whole spectrum of age is represented in these cemeteries. We as a people, as a civilization, part of our judgment, how will we be judged? Part of that will depend on how we've treated the dead, how we acknowledged the dead, how we either revered or hated the dead, how we celebrated the dead. Now, we hear of stories all the time of real estate building properties where cemeteries are or used to be, and they feel no remorse in the name of business in moving those graves. I don't know if that's an increasing or decreasing practice, but I know it has been done in the past. And to me, that is such an irreverent display of compassion, sympathy, if you will, for the dead and for the families that the dead belong to. So my dilemma is, I feel this longing for Manti, and not just the land, but the people. And I am a Latter-day Saint. And though they broke off from the main train of the Mormon migration, they still had a belief in the major doctrines of the church. Otherwise, they would not have named their community Manti. And so I feel it a necessity to succeed their death, their sacrifice, by once again placing their resting places in the hands of a church. If it not be the Latter-day Saint Church, then a church that will honor the dead the way they should be. And I believe that we should do that with all these properties of cemeteries that are in danger, because there are hundreds of them just around the United States alone that are not being kept, that are not being well taken care of. There are cemeteries that are not being used, and then they become forgotten. Eventually, they can become property for sale. And it is important and vital that we as a people become mindful, because when situations like this come up, I believe there is a natural desire, if you will, to reach out to the dead, to help them, to honor them. I believe that is something inborn in us. Whether we listen to that or not, that's up to individual choice. But for me, I look towards my own death and having to confront these people in the afterlife. And I have to make an accounting to my Maker as to my deeds here on earth. And I don't want to have the conversation with Him, have Him say, I provided you this prompting to help these who have been deceased, to honor their death, to honor their life. And you refused it. You elected not to pursue it. I believe that we would be a better people, that we would be a more compassionate and kind people, more understanding people. Not as a nation, not as a race or color, but as a world. If we would just stop and take a look at the lives of our dead, our kin, our great leaders, to take a look at them and to honor them, to succeed them in your own industry, to make them proud, if you will. And so that is something that I am struggling with at this time, is my feelings towards Manti Park here in southwest Iowa, because it does have some deep roots with the Latter-day Saint faith that I share. And so I'm going to do all I can to help assure the grounds that they have struggled to build a community on. And so those are my thoughts for the day.